Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host for today's episode, Patrick Kenny. Follow me on Twitter at PatrickKenny _ or follow us on Twitter. Follow the GSMC Baseball Podcast on Twitter at GSMC _ baseball. Leave us a review. Leave us a review on Apple iTunes. Mention us on Twitter. Give us a comment on YouTube. Just let us know how we're doing and how we can improve to give you all a better experience. So let's get into the rest of the intro. So what we're going to be going over today, we're going to talk about Major League Baseball announcing Lou Gehrig's day, and we're going to talk more about who Lou Gehrig was as a person and his battle with ALS. Then we're going to be talking about the Jackie Bradley Jr. deal with the Milwaukee Brewers. We're going to talk a little bit about James Paxton and then look a little bit at the AL West if we have a little bit of time. The Mariners probably won't do much, and this Paxton deal is probably not going to make much of an impact on the Mariners season. But nevertheless, we'll get into it, and then we're going to end today's show talking about the lack of expanded playoffs and the universal DH for this 2021 season in Major League Baseball. So we're going to get right into it in just a second. So as I'm sure all of you have probably heard by now, Major League Baseball announced Lou Gehrig's day for June 2nd. And Major League Baseball doesn't have a lot of days. Obviously, there is the Jackie Robinson Day, but other than that, there's not a lot that come to the top of your head when you think of people that have special days, and Lou Gehrig is absolutely deserving to be one of those people. He was a vital part of the New York Yankees organization from 1923 until his retirement in 1939. He obviously was one of the greatest players of all time and is definitely respected like that. So in 1923, we're just gonna go over some stats right here, just so you understand how good of a baseball player Lou Gehrig was. And in many of his seasons, he actually out-hit Babe Ruth, which is crazy to think. When you think of Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, you always think of Babe Ruth calling a shot and all these things, but actually Lou Gehrig was arguably a more consistent hitter than Babe Ruth, and just as good, if not a better hitter when you think about it. So in 1923 and 1924, he didn't play in too many games. He only played in 26 games in both of those seasons with 38 at-bats, and he only had one home run in those seasons. But that was just the beginning of his career, because in 1925, he started playing consistently in New York, and oh my gosh, did he get off to a hot start. So in 1925, he played in 126 games, which is only there were only 154 games in the regular season, and there were only 16 teams in the entire major leagues at that point in time. But even so, in his 126 games, he had 437 at bats. He scored 73 runs, had 129 hits, which is, I mean, that's more than a hit a game. He had 68 RBIs, 46 walks, and then 20 home runs, which, when you consider that he's playing in the dead ball era, it's pretty impressive, actually, when you kind of think about it, how many home runs that these guys were able to hit. Because, you know, since the steroid era in baseball, which was the 80s through the 90s and even the early aughts, home runs instead of home runs becoming something that was not few and far between, but something that was special to see, has now, following the steroid era, has now just become sort of the only thing that kind of happens a lot of times in baseball. There's not a lot of ground balls and small ball being played anymore, and that's starting to change. But when you think about how good this man was, he was playing in the dead ball era, and he had, in his 17 years, 493 home runs, and obviously he would have been playing much longer and would have probably gotten a lot more home runs had he not developed Lou Gehrig's disease, which ultimately became ALS. In 1925, like I was saying, he had 20 home runs. In 1926, in 1926, he had 16 home runs, but he hit 20 triples. In 1927, 52 doubles. The year before, 47. And in those two seasons, he led the league in doubles in 1927, which is one of the greatest teams of all time, and that's also when Babe Ruth broke the home run record at that time, and he hit 60 home runs. And he also led the league in RBIs that year with 147. 173. The following year, he also won had 147 RBIs and 47 doubles. Both of those led the league. And he also had 27 home runs. In 1930, he led the league in games played, plate appearances, and RBIs. He had 173 RBIs, played 154 games, and had 703 plate appearances. And on top of that, he hit an absurd 46 home runs. And the year before, 1930, hit 41 home runs, and the year before, in 1929, he hit 35 home runs. This dude could flat out mash the baseball. It's actually pretty astounding when you consider how good he actually was at hitting the baseball. It's so crazy when you think of baseball from that time. You don't think of the ball flying off the bat, but guys like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig, they had the swing to get the ball out of the ballpark, and they hit the ball so hard that it didn't matter if it was going out. They were going to get a lot of extra base hits. In 1931, Lou Gehrig actually led the league in hits with 211. He also led the league in runs scored that year and plate appearances. And with plate appearances, he had 738. He had 163 runs scored. Led the league in home runs with 46 and RBIs with 148. It was ridiculous how good this guy was. And around this time, Babe Ruth is starting to enter his twilight of his career, and Lou Gehrig is starting to enter his prime. And when you think about that remember that, because we're going to go over that in a little bit. We're going to talk more about Babe Ruth's relationship with Lou Gehrig and vice versa, because it started out great with Lou Gehrig sort of idolizing Babe Ruth and who he was. And then fairly soon after that, their relationship started to get a little messy, so to speak. So let's go back to his stats. I'm just going to skip to 1934. He led the league in games played with 154 games, led the league in home runs with 49, and led the league in RBIs with 166. He also led the league that year the only time he led the league that year, led the league in his career in batting average, and he hit 363 with also leading on base percentage of 465, which is astounding. A slugging percentage of 700, an OPS of 170 or 1,172. It led the league in OPS plus and led the league in total bases that year. He obviously won the MVP that year as well. And then in 1935, he played 149 games, 125 runs, led the league in walks and runs scored, led the league in walks with 132, had a higher on-base percentage by 1 point in his on-base percentage. In 1936, he led the league in games played, runs scored with 167, 49 home runs once again, 130 walks, led the league in on-base percentage with a 478 on-base percentage, as well as slugging, which he had a 6.96 slugging percentage, also led the league in OPS as well that season. And then 1937, he played in 157 games, which was league leading. Also led the league in walks that year and on base percentage. 1938 is his last full year playing. He played 157 games again. Didn't lead the league in anything special that year. Had 29 home runs, 32 doubles, 6 triples, 170 hits. He actually broke 200 hits a few times in his career. The year before, in 1937, he had 200 hits. Year before, in 1936, 205. 2 years before that, in 1934, 210. In 1932, Lou Gehrig also had 208 hits. 211, like I said, for 1931, which was league leading. The year before, he had 220 hits. And 1928, 210, 1927, 218, and those were his only years leading the league, or not leading the league, but breaking 200 hits, which is honestly really crazy when you actually think about how good think about how hard it is to get 200 hits in a year. Ichiro had a fantastic year. Or had a fantastic career, and that's what he was doing. But he was known for that, and oh my gosh, it's just so crazy to think of how good this man was at hitting the baseball. It's honestly absurd. So, and then in 1939, he only played in 8 games with 33 at-bats, or 33 plate appearances. He only scored 2 runs and only had 4 hits. But he did have 5 walks. And he was dealing with what would then become known as ALS. And then shortly after that, he retired and then ended up passing away fairly soon after that. It was, but he did give a fantastic speech at Yankee Stadium where he said the famous words, "I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth," which I don't know about you guys, but anytime I listen to that speech, it just gives me so much emotion. I almost always tear up when I hear it. It is just so sad. He would die on June 2nd in 1941 in his home in Riverdale, New York. His name was the Iron Horse for a reason. He was just so impressive. It was pretty crazy. He won 2 MVPs in his career in 1935 as well as 1926, and he finished consistently every year except for his first 2, and then in 1927. Or excuse me, in 1927 he won his first MVP, not 1926. 1926 he finished 10th place. But 1928 through 1930 he wasn't even in the MVP conversation. But every other year after that, except for his 1939 season, he was an All-Star and, he was an MVP placer. Finished second in 1930 and 1931, fourth and fifth in 1932 and 1933. Won the MVP in 1935, and then finished in fourth and then 19th in MVP voting. So his final career stats were 493 home runs. A ridiculous number in and of itself. He had 2,721 hits. I think that if he would have been able to continue playing, that he would have easily broken 3,000 hits. With RBIs, he had 1,995 RBIs. He stole 102 bases in his career, had 1,508 walks, as opposed to 790 strikeouts. And then his batting average for his career was .340, which is pretty amazing, honestly. And then his on-base percentage was .474. But real quick, I want to get into talking between his relationship with Babe Ruth. So it started out like a sort of dream come true, you could say. I mean, this man was idolizing Babe Ruth, and Babe Ruth was just the man at that point in time. And it was also pretty impressive. It was such a good relationship that Babe Ruth would come over to Gehrig's mom's house, and his mother and the Gerhig family would entertain Babe Ruth. But toward the end of his career, Babe Ruth started getting jealous that Gerhig was entering his prime and Ruth was in the twilight of his career. So he was going. He was nearing the end, obviously, of Babe Ruth's career. But one thing that was upsetting, to Babe Ruth was 1931. Babe Ruth wanted to be the manager of the Yankees. And the Yankees ended up going... so this next part comes from moregerhig.tripod.com. And Richard Bach was a friend of Gehrig's. And he wrote that their friendship was falling apart, first because Ruth was close to retirement and Gerhig was in his prime, and second, Ruth resented Joe McCarthy's appointment as manager in 1931 when Ruth was rumored to have wanted the position, and Gerhig immensely respected McCarthy, and Ruth knew it. Yes, it's true these things are stupid on both sides. This is coming from the website. Yes, it's true Gehrig's prime overlapped Ruth's twilight. It's true Ruth and Gerhig could not have had more opposite opinions on McCarthy, but the, quote, coolness, end quote, was more than an iceberg that Graham and Bach claim. Gerhig had two particularly vulnerable spots in his heart, one for his wife and one for his mother. Both women were major causes of avalanche in his friendship. Gerhig married Eleanor Twitchell in 1933, shortly after the wedding. The couple went on an all-star cruise in the fall. On the ship, Eleanor went to hang out with Ruth and his wife in their cabin. She forgot to mention this to Gerhig, who was worried about his bride that he had a search party scouring the boat and the water. When somebody finally found her, Gerhig was furious at Ruth. Gerhig was never jealous of Ruth on the field, but he was scared that his natural charm and power over women, namely Eleanor. Though nothing disputable happened in the Ruth cabin, Gerhig could not be convinced that Ruth did not have any influence over Eleanor's primal sentiments. Meanwhile, Gerhig's other best girl, Mom, was growing distant from the Ruths. While Mom thought highly of Ruth, his first wife, and his daughters, Dorothy, she did not care for his second wife. In 1934, Ruth and Claire went on a trip, leaving Dorothy at home. Dorothy went to Gerhig's house, as she often did, to hang out. Mom decided that she had been abandoned, left in subpar clothes. So when Claire came to pick up Dorothy, Mom tore into Claire. Claire in turn told Ruth that Mom was nosing in. Ruth told Gerhig that Mom needed to, quote, mind her own goddamn business, end quote. That was it for Gerhig. From his point of view, Ruth had edged in on his wife, then insulted his mother. Quote, they were never friends again, end quote, said Bill Dickey, teammate and best friend of Gerhig. And I don't know if they ever got over what they ended up if they ever got over this situation. But in Gerhig's, or in Ruth's retirement, there's a picture of Ruth Gerhig and Babe Ruth, or Lou Gerhig and Babe Ruth, hugging on the field, with Ruth in a suit, and you can see Ruth's arm around Gerhig, and Gerhig has what appears to be a smile, but you don't see that Gerhig is embracing the hug very much, and it was never reported if they had ever worked out their differences or anything like that, but nevertheless, this was a great man and an honorable man, and he absolutely deserves this day on June 2nd. And that's the day he died, in 1941. And you just can't say nice enough things about who he was as a man. So we're going to take a short break, and in just a minute, we're going to talk about Jackie Bradley Jr. signing to the Milwaukee Brewers, and we'll be right back.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And welcome back into the GSMC Baseball Podcast. So right now we're going to be talking about Jackie Bradley Jr. Now, Jackie Bradley Jr., obviously a fantastic player for the Red Sox for the past few years. He just signed a 2-year, $24 million deal with the Milwaukee Brewers. He has an opt-out after year 1, so depending on how he does this season and how the Brewers will look in the 2022 season is obviously going to play majorly into how Jackie Bradley Jr. And if Jackie Bradley Jr. will re-sign or opt in or opt out of his deal. But the Brewers now have a stacked outfield. It is quite ridiculous how good that outfield is. Now, Christian Yelich obviously was not at his MVP level form of last season. He definitely is going to try and get back to that, and I have no doubt that he will be back to that. Maybe not this year, but hopefully next year at the very latest. But they also have Lorenzo Cain, and Lorenzo Cain is probably going to be in left field. Jackie Bradley Jr. obviously is a center fielder, and then Christian Yelich, who was playing center field, will probably get moved over to right field. But they also have a Viciolo Garcia. He spent a lot of time training so he could cover more ground in right field this offseason. In fact, he lost 36 pounds just so he could play right field. And then, so it's going to be interesting to see how they do this, how they get over, or what they do to figure out this this situation with all of their outfielders, because they have quite a bit of outfielders. But let's get into Jackie Bradley Jr.'s stats or his regular season stats. So this is going to be his ninth year in the league. Now, he did come in 2013, which is what I'm including, but he only played in 37 games, had 95 at-bats, only 18 hits, nothing too special. Only hit a buck 89 that season. In 2014, he had he played in a lot more games. In fact, he played 90 more games, had 384 at-bats with 76 hits, 19 doubles, 2 triples, only 1 home run, 30 RBIs, 31 walks, and 121 strikeouts, and he had a 198 average. The following year, in 2015, he only played in 74 games, but he did play a lot better in comparison. He had 55 hits, 43 runs scored. The year before, he played in almost 50 more games and only had 45 runs scored. He had 17 doubles, 4 triples, 10 home runs, 43 RBIs, which is 13 more than he had the prior season, and had only 69 strikeouts, and had a 249 a batting average and a 335 on base percentage. In 2016, he had a really good year for him, probably the best offensive year that he had until the 2020 season. He had 149 hits, 20 doubles, 7 triples, 26 home runs, 87 RBIs, and had a 267 average with a 349 on base percentage. And last season, he played in 55 games and had 191 at-bats, 32 runs scored. He had 11 doubles, 7 home runs, and had a 283 average for a 364 on base percentage. But now with him on the Milwaukee Brewers, I obviously I was very high on them either way. They have a fantastic lineup, but and Jackie Bradley Jr., I should go back a little bit and say that he did win a Rawlings Gold Glove in 2016. It was an All-Star, an American League All-Star in 2016, and also was a part of, he was the ALCS MVP in 2018. The year that they went to win, the year that the Red Sox would go on to win the World Series. So RotoChamp now has the projected lineup of an updated projected lineup of the Milwaukee Brewers. So they have Colton Wong leading off with Lorenzo Cain in the 2 spot, Christian Yelich in the 3 spot. In the cleanup role is Keston Hiura with Omar Narvaez, in the catcher role. at number 5, Jackie Bradley Jr. hitting 6th, and then Travis Shaw and Orlando Arcia rounding out the rest of that rotation. And I mean, this team is good, guys. They are. I mean, they're in definitely a tough division. I wouldn't. I mean, this division is always competitive with the Cubs, Reds, and Cardinals. The Pittsburgh Pirates this season aren't going to be that much to really look for. I mean, RotoChamp has them projected at winning 62 baseball games this year. But the Reds and the Cardinals have pretty good teams. They might be a piece here or there away, or a piece or a prospect stepping up from maybe making the playoffs. But this is going to be a tough division with, I would say that this year isn't going to be the year that two teams from this same division make the playoffs. I would say it's probably going to go to the winner of the division only, and even then they're only getting in because they are going to win the division. But I expect the Brewers to win this division. I mean, they have a really good a really good lineup, and they have a decent amount of depth as well. I mean, if I'm going to pull up their and tell you guys about their depth in just a second, but their starters, they have Brandon Woodruff, Corbin Burns, Josh Lindblom, Adrian Hauser, and Brett Anderson. Probably going to be their 5 guys this upcoming season, and I mean they're definitely going to struggle once they get past their 1 and 2. I mean, Brett Anderson maybe less so than maybe a Josh Lindblom or a Adrian Hauser. But they're still going to have a very, very good team. They're definitely probably going to go out and buy a starter on the during free agency and things like that. Or maybe they might pick up another guy from I don't know, something. Maybe a starter that just hadn't been signed and was overlooked or couldn't get a deal done. But I would say that that's probably the one place that the Brewers really need improvement on. I mean, RotoChamp has Colton Wong projected at hitting 264, Lorenzo Cain 271, Christian Yelich 279, which isn't great, but if Christian Yelich is able to get back to that, he should be closer to his MVP form, and that's really what the Brewers want. That's what the Brewers really need. And then they have Jackie Bradley Jr. projected at 237, which makes sense because that is his career average is 239. But with him going from the American League in a very tough division that is very pitcher heavy to a league that has good pitching, but he's not going to have to face guys like Garrett Cole and John Paxton a couple or twice or on back-to-back days or something like that. He'll have to face for example on the Reds, he'll have to face Sonny Gray and then a Luis Castillo, and then after that a Wade Miley. It's not going to be anything special. He'll have to face Adam Wainwright Adam Wainwright, and then maybe a Jack Flaherty. And Jack Flaherty is one hell of a pitcher, but when you look at a lineup like the Cubs, you have Kyle Hendricks and then Jake Arrieta, and those are very good names, but when you compare them to like a John Paxton or a Garrett Cole, those guys are on sort of a different level. Obviously they're gonna have to play the Mets, and they're gonna have to play the Dodgers and the Padres, and those games are not going to be easy for the Brewers. But the Brewers are still one hell of a team, and they have a good amount of depth as well. Now they have Avisail Garcia on the bench instead of starting, which automatically gives them more depth. They have Dan Vogelbach as the backup first baseman, Luis Urias, who's a utility infielder. They also have Manny Pena, and guys like Tyrone Taylor, who is an outfielder. These are like they have on their bench right now. On their bench right now, they have it. It looks like 7. They have 7 outfielders on their 40-man roster. And their bullpen is honestly pretty good as well. They have anytime that Josh Hader is your closer, you're definitely in a good situation. His projected ERA is 2.95. He's projected to pitch in 64 innings and get about 29 saves and strike out over 100 batters. And you also have guys like Freddie Peralta, who is probably going to be their workhorse out of the bullpen. He's projected to get the most innings with over 80, with about 106 strikeouts or so. And then you also have guys like their setup guys like Devin Williams and Brett Sutter. Both of those are starting pitchers as well, but they'll probably this season be used out of the bullpen as sort of long reliever type guys. But in the minors, they also have guys like Jordan Zimmerman, who will probably get some big league action this year. And this is a good team. They're definitely not bad at all, and I could definitely see them, if they get hot toward the end of the year, making a real shot at the World Series. But you also have teams like the Reds, who if they get hot and win a couple 10-game winning streaks, and they don't lose too many series, they also have a really good shot at doing something special this year. They have Jesse Winker, Nick Castellanos, Joey Votto. Joey Votto, obviously, at the tail end in the twilight of his career in his own right, but they also have Eugenio Suarez, Mike Moustakas, Nick Senzel, Kyle Farmer, Tucker Barnhart, and their starters they're not too shabby either. These guys are definitely guys that can get stuff done. They have Michael Lorenzen projected as their 5th starter this year. He has been used in the past as a sort of bullpen arm, but he can also play the outfield. He's a two-way player, and their bullpen isn't anything to laugh at either. They have Lucas Sims, Amir Garrett, Sean Doolittle. They also have Jeff Hoffman, and if they can get their new they're one of their top prospects, Hunter Green, if they can get him up to the bigs, and he's listed as a starter in their prospect rankings, but if they can get him up there, and then maybe take out a Wade Miley from their starting rotation, or even just use Hunter Green as a bullpen arm and sort of a workhorse from the bullpen, I think that guy is just special. Like I mentioned him in the last podcast that came out just this past Wednesday of mine, that he is just a stud. He topped 100 miles an hour in 3 of his pitches just the other day in his first appearance. And they have 3 closers on this team, so they could have a similar situation to the Cleveland Indians in 2016, where they just use these 3 certain guys out of the bullpen. If they can get their starter to the 6th inning, or through the 6th inning, and they have the lead, then they're going to throw out Amir Garrett for the 7th, and then Sean Doolittle for the 8th, and then Lucas Sims for the 9th, or any variation of that. Sort of like how in 2016, at least for the regular season, with the Cleveland Indians, where they had Brian Shaw come out for the 7th inning, and then they had Andrew Miller come out for that 8th inning, and then Cody Allen would close the door in the 9th. And they did a lot of playing around with that as well, just because of how good they were. And you can't forget about the Cubs either, who have Ian Happ, Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, Wilson Contreras, Javi Baez, Jock Peterson, Nico Horner. I'm sorry, I haven't heard of that guy's name, but they also have Jason Hayward as well. And they don't have a great starting lineup, but they still have one of the best offenses in baseball. And then they also are going to have to play teams like the Cardinals, who have Paul DeJong, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Yadier Molina is still out there kicking, and they have a really good starting lineup as well. So. But I mean, the Brewers I still think are my favorite to win this division, but this division is going to be competitive, to say the very least. So don't go anywhere. We're going to go over the Mariners re-signing John Paxton in just a minute, and then we're also going to take a look at the rest of the AL West, and then after that we're going to talk about how we're going to talk about the Major League Baseball's potential expanded playoffs in the future, as well as a potential universal DH type deal, and we're going to go over that in just a minute.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So welcome back in, everybody. So the Mariners re-signed Paxton after a I don't want to call it a long time away, but he was with the Yankees for the past couple of seasons, and at first he did a very good job coming back. His deal, John Paxton's deal, is worth $11 million for this 1 year, and this guy is really, really good. And this guy is entering his prime, so to speak. And he was very good just a few seasons ago. He started his career in Seattle with the Mariners. In 2013, in 2013, it was his rookie season. He had a 3-0 record, a 1.50 ERA. 2014, pitched in 13 games, 6-4 record, a 3.04 ERA, had 74 innings pitched. The following season, same amount of games pitched, didn't do as well, but still good enough to come back the next year, pitch 20 games with a 6-7 record in Seattle, and it's hard to win in Seattle. I mean, look at King Felix's stats, and you'll see that just because a guy is a fantastic pitcher, if he, at least for this last decade or so, if you're pitching in Seattle, it's you're not going to get a lot of help. It's sort of like the Mets of the American League the last few years. But in 2017, he had one of his better years. He went 12-5 with a sub-3 ERA. 136 innings pitched, only gave up 9 home runs, struck out 156, and held opponents to a .223 batting average. That next year in 2018 was more of the same. 11-6 with a higher ERA, but held opponents to a .224 batting average and struck out a career high 208 batters. And I mean, he's a good guy. He's a good pitcher, and definitely, I definitely think that him going back to the Mariners is a pretty good deal for him. I mean, last year he was struggling with a back injury. He claimed that he has a lot of interest, but he thinks that coming back to Seattle for this 1 year is the best decision for him long term. He obviously feels very comfortable with the Mariners organization. He was there for he's been there for most of his career, and he only signed a 1-year deal. So this pitcher specifically is one guy that I'm eyeing for the for the Brewers to go get at the trade deadline. And if he can get back to where he was in 2019. I mean, and last year he was struggling quite a bit, coming off injury, but I mean, in 2019, his first year with the Yankees, he had a 3.82 ERA, had over 150 innings pitched, 186 strikeouts, a WHIP of 1.28, a 15-6 record in the 29 games that he pitched for the Yankees, and then last year, he just wasn't himself. He was coming off a back injury, and because of that, and he thought that he was better than he was, but really his back wasn't where it needed to be, and he said that because his back wasn't where it needed to be, his back leg wasn't coming off the rubber fast enough, which was causing his arm to have to try and speed up, and it was just slowing all of his pitches down and everything. And because of that, he just wasn't the same last season. And he only pitched in 5 games. He had a 1-1 record, a 1.48 WHIP with only 26 strikeouts and 20 innings pitched with an ERA over 6. I mean, this guy is not great. I shouldn't say that. He wasn't great last year, is what I should say. And because of that, I think that this is a good move for him. Just because I think that he'll be able to. I think that he'll be able to get back to where back to a similar spot and to where he was, and then hopefully by the time that the trade deadline comes around, he'll be able to go to a place that is ready to win a championship or close to winning a championship, and they feel that he will be the piece that will get them there. But the Mariners are still going to struggle in the division. I mean, they have a decent lineup with Kyle Seager and Mitch Haniger. Obviously, those are definitely two very good name players. And I think with Paxton coming back, that it will help them quite a bit, especially if Paxton is back to his form, to the form where he was just a few years ago. And I mean, but they still have teams like the Oakland Athletics and the Angels and the Astros, who are clearly better than them. I mean, and the Athletics are a dark horse team are a lot of people's favorite dark horse team to kind of surprise a lot of guys. I mean, they have Mike Fiers and Sean Manaea and Chris Bassett and Jesus Luzardo. I'm sorry, excuse me. And those are all very good pitchers. Like, and the Athletics, more than anybody, I would say, know how to get value out of players that other teams might not know how to get value out of. I mean, their lineup is very good. They have Mitch Moreland and Elvis Andrus and Matt Chapman and Matt Olson as well. I mean, they have a decent lineup, but they don't have a. I don't think that they're going to be anything that is super special this year. And I mean, I could be completely wrong, but with that, I don't think I am. And with that being said, I think that the Athletics are a decent team, but I'm honestly higher on the Angels than I am the Athletics. I think my favorite dark horse team this season is going to be the Angels. I mean, they have a decent lineup. With, Mike Trout, obviously, Anthony Rendon, Justin Upton, Shohei Ohtani, Dexter Fowler, Jose Iglesias. Those guys are their 3 through 8. I think that this team is very good, especially hitting the ball. The only thing that I would say that they're going to probably struggle with is pitching. I mean, they did go out and sign Alex Cobb and Jose Quintanilla, and they have Shohei Ohtani as well. They're obviously probably not going to use Shohei Ohtani very much this season, just because they don't want to overthrow him and then have him be out like he was, but this is a fantastic two-way player, so he's probably going to be DHing quite a bit, just because of how good he is at hitting the ball. If they play any or further interleague games, I would expect him to pitch, just because that way they can still have his bat in the lineup for a game at the very least. But Jose Quintanilla is going to be a very good pitcher for them, as is Alex Cobb. Neither of those guys are going to win a Cy Young this year, but at the same time, they're still serviceable pitchers that are going to pitch a lot of innings and get them, hopefully, a lot of wins. And I mean, their bullpen and their bench they're okay. I mean, like they don't have anything that is super special. It's just kind of meh at this point in time. But they obviously all still have to go through the Houston Astros, and the Astros did lose Garrett Cole prior to last season, and that definitely made a huge difference. And they're not going to have Justin. They're not going to have Justin Verlander at least for a little bit, just because he's still hurt. Excuse me. I was gonna look up when he's gonna come back, but he did have Tommy John, so he's probably not. He's probably not gonna come back if we're gonna be honest, at least this year. But the Astros do have Zach Greinke. They do have Lance McCullers, and those two are very good pitchers. Greinke could surprise everybody and win an MVP in this half of his career. Well, I'm not an MVP, I should say a Cy Young, but maybe an MVP. Justin Verlander won an MVP, so it's been done before. It is possible. And who knows? He might come out and be the best pitcher that we've ever seen. At this point in his career, he might pull a Justin Verlander and just be the most dominant pitcher that anybody has ever seen, just out of the blue, sort of. But you do have to look at guys like Jose Altuve and Alex Bregman, Michael Brantley, Carlos Correa, Yordan Alvarez, Yuri Gurriel, Kyle Tucker. All of these guys are fantastic players. And that's why they're probably going to be, if there is a team, I think, to compete with the Yankees this year in the American League, I think it's still the Astros. I mean, they have a very, very good core. Obviously, they did lose George Springer to the Blue Jays. He signed a massive deal, and the Astros weren't going to be able to pay him just because, he was worth the money that he got to go to Toronto, or I should say Buffalo this year. But he's worth the money that they're paying him, and he. But the Astros are definitely going to feel that, and they still have their core of Correa and Altuve up the middle, and they have Michael Brantley and Bregman, and those are very, very good guys, and very serviceable players to say the very least. So Michael Brantley, because Springer's not there anymore, he might have to go back out in the outfield, which is not great for if you're Michael Brantley, just because of his injury history. So I think that the Astros are probably going to try and stay away from that, just because of his injury history, and he did go 2 for 2 in his most recent game in spring training, but he's always been a good hitter. He's projected to hit around 300 this year, so he's going to be very good, and he's going to be, honestly, probably their best hitter this season. And the Astros still have a very decent bullpen staff as well. They have Pedro Baez and Blake Turner and Joe Smith and Ryan Presley. Presley's projected to be their starter this year. And Pedro Baez is still there, like I just said, and Both of those guys are very, very good pitchers. They throw very hard. But for the Astros to do something special this year and catch lightning in a bottle while they still have the opportunity, while their team is still young and they can still sort of keep their players together, I think that they are going to need another starter as well, which is why. But I don't know if that the Mariners are willing to trade within the division. But John Paxton is let's face it, he is a hell of a deal. He's probably the pitcher that is going to get the most attention for the trade deadline. I'm already looking toward that point for some of these teams. And Paxton could be that guy that they need. Paxton might be the guy that the Brewers need, but it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens this year with Paxton specifically. And who knows? He might not even get dealt. Only time is really going to tell, like who is going to be able to, or who needs what and when, and all of that is very important and crucial on who's able to stay healthy, who is playing above where they normally are, and finally who is worth trading for. And I definitely think Paxton is one of those guys. And if you're the Astros, you have to be willing to give up a couple prospects to hopefully make a run and get past the Yankees this year. Now, the Yankees are definitely going to be the powerhouse of this year, and I saw a power ranking earlier today, actually, that had the Yankees as the number 2 power ranked team in baseball. And I don't know if the Yankees are the second best team in baseball right now, but I do think they're the best team in Major League. I think that maybe the Mets or Padres might be the second best, but with that being said, I think that the Yankees are a very good team and deserve the hype that they're getting. I mean, I don't see another team in the American League that can even really compete with the National League teams this year. I just think that the National League teams are going to be so dominant, which is why I think that I think that Paxton going, if Paxton gets traded within the division to the Astros, I think that is going to potentially push the Astros over the top. I think that they match up pretty well against the Yankees. Obviously you still have the Rays in there, but other than that, I think these are the 3 teams that are going to do something or have the ability to do something against powerhouses and just juggernauts of teams like the Padres and the Dodgers. I think that if Verlander can come back and is healthy and that the Astros go out and get themselves that second pitcher, I could definitely see that the Astros making the World Series this year. But I don't know if they're going to be able to get that second pitcher, and I don't think that Justin Verlander is going to come back and be even half of who he was. And he has proven everybody wrong in the past because everybody thought his career was done a long time ago, and it just isn't. That guy just found the fountain of youth in Houston and was able to revitalize his career. And who knows, he might find that fountain of youth once more. But with that being said, we're going to take another short break, and we're going to talk about the lack of plans for the universal DH and the lack of plans for the expanded playoffs. In just a second, we're going to get my opinions on that as well. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And welcome back in, everybody, to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. In this segment, we're going to be talking about Major League Baseball's plans, or lack of plans, I should say, for the expanded playoff, and then ultimately for a universal DH. For this season, there's not going to be any expanded playoff, and there is also not going to be a universal DH yet. Now, the MLBPA and the Players Association and Major League Baseball actually have a CBA deal expiring after this year, I believe. So they're going to, both parties are going to sit down and hammer out details. The Players Association definitely wants the universal DH, and Major League Baseball tried to leverage that this year. By saying that they would allow the use of the universal DH if they were able to get expanded playoffs or something of that nature. Long story short, Major League Baseball didn't want to succumb to the pressure from baseball in general, and decided to not accept the offer for expanded playoffs and for the universal DH. But last season, in the 2020 season, the players were offered $50 million for the expanded playoffs. And then this year, the MLB offered $80 million, and the players just didn't feel like that was up to the status quo. I mean, they only played 60 games last season, and then this season they ended up they're going to play a full 162-game season, so the players just felt like that wasn't fair enough, considering that last season they got $50 million, and this year they're going to have to play an extra 100 games, and they're only getting an extra $30 million from that. And I can definitely see where the MLBPA is coming from in this situation. But the MLBPA is is very interested in a new deal. With Major League Baseball, and part of their interests include a universal DH, but the MLBPA fears a sort of lowering the bar in a sense, and and Major League organizations, I should say, are the Major League Baseball Players Association feels that they or the Major League owners would invest less in their rosters, and they would be incentivized to invest in their rosters, specifically pitchers, if they're allowed to have a universal DH. But my opinion goes a little something like this. Like, I like the idea of expanded playoffs, but with a shortened season. I don't think that baseball needs to be 162 games anymore. I think that honestly, it's by far the longest regular season in major sports. And I love baseball, and I love as much baseball as I can possibly consume. But with that being said, a shortened season, or a shorter season of I think around 100 games or so, Major League Baseball would still have the longest season in professional sports, and they still have this would give players a much better opportunity to I would say or to rest and stay healthy. So injuries wouldn't happen as much, and then we would see more baseball in a better sense. We would see better baseball because players would be able to stay healthy. So from the fans' perspective, it would give fans a better baseball to watch, and more time to watch baseball, and it would incentivize, I think, fans going to the games, because with 162, you're like, oh, well, I can just go to the game tomorrow if I can't go, or something of that nature. Whereas if the season were shortened to 100 games and you only have 50 home games, then you're much more incentivized to go to the games when you have the opportunity, and so I think that would help the owners in that aspect, but I also think it would give the fans better baseball to watch because pitchers wouldn't be overthrown so much. It would give it would make the games matter more, I think, than they do necessarily now. Like now, if a team goes on a 10-game losing streak, they can bounce back rather quickly, and then go on a 10-game winning streak and be at a better position than when they were or before they went on their 10-game losing streak and then 10-game winning streak. And that can still happen if in the 100-game series or in a 100-game season, but it would make a very interesting. It would make slides that happen in baseball. It would make that a lot more interesting to see when they were going to be able to get out of this situation. And then it would make the games matter more is basically what I'm trying to say, because the season would still be shorter, but Major League Baseball still would have the longest Major League season, and then they would. I think that is a fair compromise, just because I think that Major League Baseball the season's already too long, and I think that players would be able to train more in the off season if the season were shorter. I think that with a shorter season, you also get an expanded playoff, and then with that, I think that fans would be a lot more intrigued in baseball again. But I think that getting the universal DH would also be a very interesting part of the game. But I think if you have the universal DH, I don't think there's a need anymore for an American or National League, because I still like the American and National Leagues because they're different. You understand what I'm trying to say, y'all? I think that with the National League being its own entity where pitchers can't hit, or where pitchers have to hit, and the American League pitchers don't hit, it gives more reasoning to have two different leagues. But I think that if there is no difference in the league anymore, there's just a universal DH, I think that there should be a division realignment where they make it purely geographical. So, like, for example, the one division could be a Northeast division where it's the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Mets, the Blue Jays, the Orioles, and then potentially the Nationals if they get put into that division. And one could be like an all West Coast division where you have all of the California teams with the Dodgers, the Padres, the Angels, the Athletics, and then you throw in the Seattle Mariners. And there's a ton of Midwest divisions that you could do. You could do a division with the Reds, the Cleveland baseball team, because we don't know what their name would be, or we don't know what their name is going to be. And then you have the Pirates and the Phillies, and then the Tigers, or maybe even the Twins. And then you could have a Southern division where you have the Miami Marlins and the Atlanta Braves and the Tampa Bay Rays, the Astros, and then the Rangers. I just think that there's a lot of stuff that you can do just because there's just nothing more to happen. Like, there's no reason for there to be an American League and a National League. And I think that would give people, I think it would make All-Star Weekend a little bit more fun. I think with this you get the geographical rivalries still. But I do also have mixed feelings about letting go of that, just because I think it's fun when an American League pitcher goes to a National League ballpark. Like, one of my favorite instances of this is when Trevor Bauer, when he was still with the Indians, he went to, I believe, Pittsburgh, and he had to hit, and he decided to copy a whole bunch of batting stances from different teammates and things like that, and it was just a fun clip to watch because he knew that he probably wasn't going to get a hit, and he ended up walking in his at bat actually, which makes that even funnier. But I do like the idea of getting a universal DH, but I think that there needs to be division realignment. And then you could still have conferences, sort of like the NBA, where you have a West Coast and an East Coast type deal. Or even if, for example, on All-Star Weekend, you could have a All-Star, like a pool play kind of deal, or a round robin or something, where instead of having a home run derby, you have two of the games played on that Friday night, and then one game, and then you have the winners play on Saturday, and you keep it divided by division. So you would have like the California division going up against the Midwest division in the first round, and the winner of that would play the winner of the South division in the Northeast division, or something of that nature. I just think it would be I just think it would be a fun idea. And I know that I forgot to include teams like Arizona and St. Louis, but I just think that it would be really fun for teams to get to. I just think it would be a fun mix-up, in all honesty. I think that baseball kind of needs a mix-up. It's a very old sport in compared to like basketball or baseball, or basketball or football, I should say. And I just think that it would be a fun experiment at the very least if Major League Baseball got rid or made the universal DH a league-wide thing instead of just an American League thing. And then I think that pitchers would probably be used differently, especially now that there would be a universal DH. So, guys like Bartolo Colon, who hasn't played in the league in the last few years, obviously, but he would still have the opportunity to go out and be just so fun, or he would have more time to focus on pitching, which would make the pitching better, and then the hitters, and then there would be more opportunity for guys to have, like guys like Michael Brantley, for example, who are injury ridden if they play in the field, but if you put them at DH, they're just fantastic hitters. Or guys that are just straight up awful defensively, you can put them at DH and then have a guy out there strictly for defense at that position or something like that. I just think that it would be a lot of fun to sort of just mix up the game like that. I don't know. I just think that I could see this being a super fun new experiment and things like that. I mean, there just are a ton of possibilities that could go in any direction if Major League Baseball decided to go this way. And I think that I would just love to see it. I think it would just be so fun. It kind of sounds like a video game type deal where you don't know necessarily where you're going to end up if the divisions are realigned. If you're a team like Arizona or you're a team like the Blue Jays, you don't know if they're going to put in a like North division when they realign everything. I don't know. I think it would just be so fun. It would mix up everything. You would get in-state rivalries more often. Like, for example, you would get the Pirates and the Phillies aren't in the same division, so they don't play each other that much. And the Cleveland Indians and the Cincinnati Reds are in the same state as well as the Pirates and the Phillies, but they're in different leagues, so they don't play very much. And real quick before I end today's episode, I did forget to mention that Jackie Bradley Jr.'s replacement in Boston, Jared Duran, is hitting about 500 so far through about 5 games played, and he's 7 for 7 in put-out attempts in the field. And this guy, it looks like Boston is going to be in a very good situation. I mean, obviously you can't replace Mookie Betts, but it is easier to replace a Jackie Bradley Jr. than a Mookie Betts, and Jaron Duran looks like he is going to be a very solid outfielder for the Red Sox for the next couple years. And I think that I don't think that Red Sox fans need to freak out about another loss. I know that personally, I was really upset when Lindor was traded away, and I know that you all were also very upset when Mookie Betts got traded away, but that's baseball sometimes. And the important thing to remember is that it's just a game, and I know that we tend to get attached to these players, but it's just business. It's just a game, and eventually your team will be back to where it was. It's taken the Indians still, almost over 80 years, I want to say, or close to 80 years since they won the World Series. And the Red Sox, you guys finally got over the hump of in 2006, and then your city has had one of the greatest sporting dynasties in history with the Patriots and the Celtics and the Bruins and also the Red Sox. It's your city has had just such amazing opportunities with winning the past 20 years plus or so. So it's just important to remember for Red Sox fans that it's all going to be okay. You guys will be back to the playoffs in a couple of years, but it's not the end of the world. But so that's going to probably do it for me today, y'all. My name is Patrick Kenny. Thank you for listening this far if you did. I know I tended to ramble a little bit in this last segment, but nevertheless, we're here now, so thank you for sticking with me. My name is Patrick Kenny. Like I said, leave us a review on Apple Podcast or follow us on Spotify. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. All of that is GSMC Baseball Podcast. Just type it in the search bar. It'll show right up. And follow me on Twitter at @PatrickKenny_, or follow the podcast on Twitter. You get everybody else like Jack and Jack, and you guys can reach us on that. Just give us a shout, let us know, leave us a review, let us know how we can help y'all enjoy this podcast more, or if you want us to talk about a specific club a little bit more, just give us some feedback and we'll be happy to oblige. Thank you guys for listening. Y'all have a great rest of y'all's day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.